if you go back to mid-century, late 20th century, I mean, families didn't really think about organizing their wealth.
Right.
For sure. It was very, very siloed. You had lawyers, you had accountants, you had these investment counselors, they were called. Sometimes they talked to the lawyers, sometimes they didn't. So the concept of integrated wealth management was very limited. I'm not saying that there weren't forward-looking firms. The firm that I founded with my husband was one of those. An advice-giving firm doesn't make a whole lot of money, but you certainly have loyal clients. And it wasn't a lucrative business to be in the business of coordinating. And you did have some bank trust departments. They were really the seeds of the organization. They had trusts that needed governance, they needed investments, they needed all kinds of financial services. So they were kind of the seed of moving, people moving together as a family and coordinating. Their wealth was not the same as it is today. I mean, even if you inflation adjust the wealth was less in the 70s, even in the 80s. It really took the whole idea of selling, companies going public, legacy businesses actually going public, families getting lots of cash. I remember some of the early families that I met had cashed out in the 70s, and they were kind of forced to set up these family offices. There was always this big legacy wealth of the Rockefellers and the Phippses, but that was kind of untouchable, and in the past. So this whole, as Lee said, the stew of advice was kind of percolating, and then enter more and more wealth, more attention by financial services firms to wealth. When I first got into business, it was unusual to be on the private client side of the business. That was in the early 70s. The usual thing was you were on the institutional side. That's where the money was, that's where the professionals were, that's where the men were, for sure. And it was just a very different way of looking at private clients, private wealth. Fast forward into the late 80s, early 90s with the beginnings of organizations like IPI, the beginning with Fox, the Fox of the world, International Sky. Families started to see each other and say, oh, we have one of those, but we're doing it that way. How about you? And that's really how the momentum started to become this cottage industry in the early 90s, really, of family offices.
Similar, sort of like a self-identification, like we're
yeah,
sort
it really
of
was.
there,
It's
getting
like
our
people
way
found
into
each
it.
other. It's not that the Phippses didn't know the Rockefellers, they lived across the street from each other. They didn't really talk too much about what they were doing, at least early on.